Welcome back to the Spiderforest Webcomic podcast. I'm Matthew Moyen. In this episode, point and click. Webcomic artists very often have to be their own web designers as well, and that can seem like a very complicated task. But fear not, help is on the way. First, Christina Major of the comic Sombulus has a special interview with Ben Gremillion, the co-creator of the webcomic platform Grawlix, and they'll be talking about CMS and web publishing. Then, Dan Kelly, creator of the comic Saffron and Sage, will be back for a discussion with Monica Galvan of the comic Moonslayer, Sophie Frechner of the comic Soul's Journey, and Alyssa Alecci of the comic Lapse. The web holds no mysteries for us, so stay with us.
Hello, my name is Christina Major, and I produce the webcomic Sombulus. While there are a lot of options out there for hosting your comic on the web, a content management system, or CMS, is probably the optimal way to keep control over the hosting, design, and sometimes even rights over your webcomic. I'm here with Ben Gremillion, creator of the Grawlix CMS, which is a newer CMS specifically made for webcomics that many members at the Spiderforest Collective actually use. Thanks for joining me, Ben.
Well, thank you for having me, Christina.
Yeah, no problem. So, what was the webcomic scene like when you first got the idea to create Grawlix?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. It was WordPress. Everyone was using Comic Press, Comic Easel at the time. There are a few things out there like Taptastic, but we looked at it and we decided that we thought we could do a little better.
Yeah.
My wife and I are big webcomic readers, and we discovered there wasn't really what we thought was a good solution.
Yeah, it's all plugin based, right? Because you had WordPress, which is a blogging software, but you had to get some other sort of thing to plug in or augment it, tweak it so that it makes it workable for webcomics, right?
That's right. You could do it without, but if you didn't have the plugin, you were just kind of making it up as you went. Comic Easel does a pretty good job on top of WordPress, but it's still trying to be all things to all people, in our opinion.
So what is Grawlix then? What problems does that solve?
Well, the Grawlix CMS is dedicated strictly to webcomics. We've had people try to use it for gallery software, but it doesn't quite work like that. We've got BackNext built right in. We've got automatic archives and publishing and sharing options, RSS, and now JSON feeds. There's a whole lot of stuff that are made for graphics.
That's great. Especially when I started making websites back in the day where you were hand coding your own HTML and just throwing everything on there. But if you wanted to make a sequential thing like a webcomic, then you had to say, okay, this is page1.html, page2.html, and kind of craft your own archive thing. I think a lot of people, when they're making their sites, don't necessarily realize that the archiving is super important to be able to, for a CMS to handle. So I appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome for that. It's funny you mention archives as being important because these days we realize that, yes, they're critical. But when we first started out, Alpha 01, we didn't even have archives at all. It wasn't until one of the early betas where we said, hey, we should probably have some archives in there. Well, how hard can that be? Yeah. Looking back, turns out it was rather complicated.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like you've solved the problem at least, so that's great. And I see you all the time in the webcomic hashtag chats on Twitter, and you've got a Patreon and some other really great resources for learning HTML and CSS, which is, you do have to know a little bit of that to use Grawlix, right?
That's right. The more you know, the more you can customize it to fit whatever you want it to look like.
Why should people necessarily do that instead of just like downloading a theme from Tumblr or hosting on Tapastic or Webtoons? Like, what's the advantage of having your own space?
Well, it's simple. You can control it as far as you want to go. You can add your own graphics. You can make them all work together. You control everything from the way the HTML works, which involves your SEO, search engine optimization. And you can rest assured that it is yours. It is your code. It is the way you want things to go. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of times when you sign up for these services or social media-based sort of things, they have terms and conditions. You don't necessarily own everything you put on there. So having a CMS is important, and making sure that it actually works for a webcomic is super important. So we certainly appreciate what you're doing here. Is there anything new that you're looking to do with Grawlix, or what's the future look like?
We just released 1.4 today, just about 4 hours ago, as a matter of fact, and that had some big improvements. You can now customize URLs in comic pages. We changed the way those archives work so they're better structured, and now you can have images in them. We introduced JSON feeds, and you can control RSS a little better. And we've got a brand new content block editor just for people who like those static pages. Coming up for the future, though, that's today. In the future, well, we've got a lot of things in the works. We're looking at multiple books per website, faster page display, covers for those books, and we're trying to figure out how to do things like tags and search and bookmarks. We want to have a media browser eventually. We're going to put together a gallery page pretty soon, simpler install process, and some things we're not ready to talk about just yet.
Okay. We'll certainly look forward to those because that sounds exciting, especially multiple books. So like if you have more than one comic, you're saying you can have different pages devoted to that, or? Different
pages, yes. A different stream of pages, as it were. Each book would have its own set of archives, which is the big deal. But yeah, that's a very popular request that we've had.
And it really does sound like you're responsive to other people's needs, which I really appreciate. You know, a lot of the WordPress sort of things, and even my CMS is kind of someone developed it, they put it out there, but in terms of keeping it updated or listening to user feedback as people use and comment on how you're doing, you can't always expect that from a developer. So it sounds like you really have a passion for webcomics and creators and what they're doing.
We do. We both have art backgrounds. We have BFAs from way back when. And we like webcomics. We read them all the time. Like you said, we're active in the Twitter chats because we like connecting with artists and we like what they're doing. You're right. We have a very active forum, and that's where we get a lot of our feedback from, is people saying, hey, this doesn't work, or hey, this does work now, thank you. And wish list items like multiple books, like I said, are very popular. So yeah, we try to stay involved. It's a real active community, and we like meeting people about it.
So if people are using Grawlix, they should go to, your URL is getgrawlix.com, and then also they can hit you up on Twitter or your forum, and of course your Patreon if they want to give back a little in support for the work you're doing, right?
Absolutely. We do appreciate all the support we get. Patrons, I might add, get insider information. They learn about things before they happen, learn about our process and what's going on behind the scenes.
I was just really impressed with the HTML and CSS guide because that's such a need, in my opinion. Like I said, I come from a background where I do web design and I know this stuff, but a lot of webcomic creators are scared of it. They're very intimidated by the code sort of aspects of maintaining a webcomic. It's really great that you're making resources to make that easier for them.
And we're happy to provide it. It's funny you mentioned the ebook too. That came from a series of lectures I gave about HTML and CSS because I like to teach. What can I say? And it started off without any Grawlix information in it whatsoever. It was straight HTML and CSS. It was just a list of notes until we realized that, hey, there's an actual need here. People want to know about theming. They want to know about specifics to webcomics. And they want to know more about our system. So we rewrote it from scratch. We built it from the ground up twice, as a matter of fact. And what you see today is the result of a couple of years of effort.
Wow, that's so awesome that you put in the work to really customize that and make that useful for the webcomic community.
In fact, people outside of the community have found it useful as well. They just kind of skip over chapter 4, which talks about theming specifically for us.
Okay, well, great. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention? Any advice for people who are just starting out, trying to build a webcomic site, don't know where to start?
Well, the first thing that you want to do is know how to spell Grawlix, because we get that quite a bit. The website address is Grawlix, Grawlix.com. You can find us on Twitter at Grawlix Comics and Patreon as well. But if you want to get started, the first thing you need to decide is what kind of website you want to do. Do you want to run it yourself? Do you want to adopt our system and do it from scratch? Or do you want more of a service where you have less control, but you can get up and running in a hurry? We admit Tumblr is good for that, and services like Tapas are pretty good. But it depends on how much you want to invest in your comic. how seriously you want to take it and how far you want to go. The first step really is to decide how much you want to do, how much you want to invest, and how far you want to go with it. Next thing you want to do is get yourself a web host if you want to follow the Grawlix CMS route. We're fans of DreamHost, but Bluehost and a bunch of others work just as well, so long as they run PHP and MySQL, the database. After that, you download our software, like I said, get Grawlix, and then you follow the instructions. The new version's got more instructions that help you out, get started, and answer some common questions.
Awesome. So yeah, that's pretty thorough. Just get your host, get your domain name probably too, but then you're set.
Pretty much. You just run through the install script, you fill out the blanks, and you're off and running.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spiderforest podcast. I'm your host, Saffron and Sage writer Daniel Kelly, and with me is Lapse creator Alyssa Alechi.
Hello.
Soul's Journey's Sophie Fletchna.
Hi.
And Moonslayer artist Monica L. Galvin.
Hey.
And today here we're going to be talking about websites and CMSs. So just to kick us off, Alyssa, what do you think is the most important thing about making a website for your comic?
I kind of like it when the websites are more immersive versus just kind of having a more standard template. I always like to see that the website kind of matches the content of the comic, having everything match visually. Of course, you want things that are going to be functional as well. Personally, I really like to see that websites have an about page because I like to know what the webcomic is about. I always considered it kind of like a back of the book blurb.
What about, Sophie? What do you think about that? Do you think maybe something like a landing page that kind of just introduces you to the comic is a good thing to have in your homepage? Yeah, if you look at some sites, if you look at, for instance, my site, if you go to my homepage, it's a landing page which just links to each of the 3 comics that I have awkwardly stitched together on this one site that's breaking everything. Is that a way to do things, having this kind of a landing page, having this introduction, click here to actually read it, or is there more to be said for having the comic itself front and center?
I personally like having a landing page first. For one, spoilers, and for another, I get a feel of what the comic might be about, rather than just being thrown into it. I mean, that's especially important if you have new readers, I think. If you have readers that are just returning for the weekly updates, or you should provide a link that goes directly to the latest comic page.
Do you think the genre also plays into that? If something is a gag and a day comic, is it maybe more important to have the comic on the front page rather than having just a description of it? Because there's no spoilers to be had?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, a gag and day comic, you might need to get to know the characters better to actually appreciate the gag behind them. But it's not like you're spoiling a major story moment. So yeah, for gag a day, it's probably okay to have it right there when you arrive at the homepage.
I definitely agree that there ought to be a page where you can bookmark it and get to the latest one right away. I think out of everybody here, I'm the only person that does not have a landing page. The reason why, and here's the thing, I did consider having a landing page, and I do like them. I don't think that they're any worse than what I have, but I like that having the front page out to show kind of the content of the comic. It's like, for example, when I show my comic to people in the wild, I always just say here's my website, and then they open it and they see the page right away, and they're like, oh,
When I had the second chapter of my comic, I had some new scenes, and I had to avoid showing it to other people because they could find the tits on the front page. So I decided to install the landing page to avoid any dramas for the future. So I think in that case, you can avoid a wrong impression of your comic. Because if the first thing they see of your comic is a nude scene or something violent, and they instantly close the window, but it's a failure for the webcomic because you're losing a reader.
Yeah, I guess if you have any kind of mature content, a landing page should be...
Yeah, mandatory, yeah.
One thing that really jumped out at me in this interview is they were talking about Grawlix, which I'm personally very familiar with, and how it can handle multiple different webcomics on the same website. And that's something that I myself had a lot of trouble with. If you go to my site, you'll see that I have a comic easel running on the back end, but the fact that I have 3 different comics, it's very awkward. I can't actually have a latest comic link I've discovered. So I'm thinking about maybe switching to something like Grawlix. I'm kind of curious about learning a bit more about it.
Okay, yeah, I'm using Grawlix, and I'm very happy with the CMS. But so far, it's not handling multiple webcomics. That's still something to come in the future. I think they announced it for Grawlix 2.0.
Yeah, I tried to contact them because I wanted some option to have multilingual comics because I publish my comics in 2 languages at the moment, in English and Spanish, and soon I will try to get in French. So WordPress gave me the option to have the page in all the languages I wanted. But in the other hand, Grawlix is you can only configure it for 1 language. So in my case,
So far,
yeah,
yes.
so far.
I mean, I'm really looking forward to the multiple webcomics because I want to get multiple short stories out and instead of creating a new page again and again.
Yeah, in my case, when I was using WordPress with Comic Press, I had installed other plugin from Translate the Pages, and I only had to upload 1 page with 1 article and the same page in different languages. So I only had to create 1 page for everything. But now, with the new Comic Easel, I had to switch to Polylang, and that was double everything. So the weight of the website right now is huge.
Speaking about, we're talking about loading speeds. This is something that I've noticed a lot lately is artists, when they save their comic pages, I feel like a lot of them don't necessarily optimize for file size enough. Because even though internet's a lot faster than it used to be, that kind of stuff still really does matter.
I actually found that, or I find that a lot of artists don't actually know about web resolution. Like, I mean, this is really embarrassing, but I honestly didn't even know that I should have my pages optimized at 72 DPI until probably like 2 years after I started my comic. And then it was suddenly like, oh, well, this is why it's not loading. So I think that's definitely something that some new people need to hear sooner rather than later.
Now, why is that? What is a DPI, and what does it mean?
That is, I believe...
Dots per inch.
Yes, that's it. Thank you. Well, for example, like the advice that I was given, and don't get me wrong, this is correct advice, is to make your web pages on a 300 DPI resolution, and that's for print. But when you save the file again to put it on the web, 72 is optimal because you're not going to get much of a better image.
Yeah, a screen can't get more out of the picture.
Yeah, so you're going to want to save it at that smallest DPI possible so that it loads the fastest.
Yeah, but also when you export the image, you have to control the image quality and do it in an optimal way to don't distort the final page. I usually try to export it with a high, medium quality to avoid any grains to the...
Oh, yes.
But making it small enough to load properly.
Yeah, I had my pages at 900 pixels width before, but for once it was really, really large. And for another, page file sizes were quite large too, and especially if you want to load it on mobile where you have to look after your data volume, that was not optimal. So I reduced it down to 850 pixels in width, and now I think it's a little better at least.
Nowadays, more and more people are accessing, the internet via phones, to the point that it's almost a bit of a cliche to say it. But even now, I still see websites that are just not readable on a phone screen. How important do you think it is to make your websites mobile responsive?
I think that's extremely important. Most of the time these days when I'm reading a webcomic, I do it like right before I go to bed or when I wake up in the morning. And when I do that, I am always on my phone. I am not on my laptop at all. So my website is optimized in such a way where my page is the biggest size it can be if you were to access it on the phone, so that you don't have to zoom in constantly to read everything, because that's always a pain in the neck, I find. And you're going to want to have some kind of way to get to the next page rather than clicking a tiny, tiny, tiny next button. Like whether it be the comic image itself or you just make the next button really big on mobile, you just have to do something to compensate.
With my latest layout, I try to make it mobile friendly and make it load the fastest as possible in a mobile phone. That's why I saved all the images in the more optimal resolution and make them load faster.
Yeah, mine got streamlined for mobile devices too, I think last year sometime. What really bugged me a long time was the Project Wonderful ad, since that didn't want to resize properly. But now that I got that down, it's loading quite well, and yeah, I'm still trying to find a way to reduce file sizes, especially for the pages, since they're the main thing. I'm still thinking about getting a better navigation for mobile, since mine is quite small, but I think you can really tap it nicely still. Here's another thing I've been wondering about, since I talked about it with some other comic creators: archives.
Yeah, archives. Yeah, very important thing.
I mean, many webcomic creators says that they like having thumbnails in their archives, and others just like to list the pages.
The best archives I've ever seen in a webcomic, it's a comic called Dumbing of Age, which is fairly popular. And the reason I think it's one of the best I've seen is because it's the most easily searchable that I've seen. For those of you who aren't familiar with the comic, every single strip that happens, it's tagged with all the characters who appear in it, even if they're minor. So if someone refers to something and you want to see what it is, you can click their name and you can see all the comics of that character and very easily find everything involving that character in the previous storylines, which I just find really neat, and it's something that I think puts a lot of other archives kind of to shame, including my own. Every single comic I put up is tagged with all the characters, and you can't see it because the Genesis WordPress theme sucks, but I think it's important when possible. And it's something that when I do redesign my site, I'm going to put a lot of thought into. Even in a story-based comic, just be able to search for stuff. If you have a character show up, readers, especially if they're reading live, such and such a character might show up that hasn't shown up in 2 years. I think it's really useful for readers to be able to go, who the hell is this? And then immediately and very quickly be able to find the last chapter where this character showed up. Even comics I really like that are long-form comics, like Gunner Crate Court, if there are individual things or scenes that I'm looking for, it can be somewhat difficult to find them if I don't remember the name of the chapter they were in. And I think being able to search an archive is really cool.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember right now the comic Dreamland is coming to a close, and a lot of characters from the previous story appear again, and I have to admit, I forgot about all of them. And the archive for Dreamland Chronicles, it's just the chapter covers, and then you still would have to go through the entire chapter to see if this was the thing you're looking for. So yeah, I'd like to at least have each page listed individually, so the search is a lot faster then.
I mean, I'm actually not a Grawlix user, but I have made other people's websites in Grawlix, but here's a point where I can pimp Grawlix a bit. They do have a transcript thing, like a box where you can put whatever the dialogue is in so that you can search it later.
The only major webcomic I've seen do that is actually Homestuck, where they just had a page where it's literally just all the words in the comic, and of course, comic is very famously mostly words, but I found it really easy to find specific things whenever I needed to. I just really like being able to search an archive, and I think a lot of archives are really only useful if you know the name of the page or the chapter that you want to read, and if you're trying to look something up, a lot of archives on the internet are actually not that good.
Another thing that I think would probably be important to touch on is creators who have no experience with code. They get really intimidated about the idea of making a website, and I actually was one of these people at one point, because I do not come from a web background at all. I was just an artist, so at the time, I first started out with Smack Jeeves and just tweaking my Smack Jeeves page. But a lot of my friends who are also into webcomics, they just are absolutely terrified of the idea of getting into the nuts and bolts of the code. And I think that turns a lot of people off towards making a website and is what puts them on towards, in some cases, to using something like Tapas or Webtoons.
Yeah, I'm one of those people too. I started on Smack Jeeves. It gave me the opportunity to still customize my website then. And then jumping into my own stuff, it was completely different from what Smack Jeeves offered me. But I personally, I liked puzzling everything together and just refreshing the page to see if it works now.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of time that goes into this, but I liked it.
I think a good thing for people to do if they are serious and want to make a site but are scared of code, I would actually point them towards Comic Press to start with.
No,
And then you
no,
can learn. No?
definitely no. It's the learning curve of WordPress is very high. You have to learn a lot of code, use a lot of plugins, and read a lot of documentation to make it work.
Yeah, that's one thing I experienced too.
You have to learn a lot of design and code to make it look nice. Because I tried other layouts, pre-made layouts, but somehow they didn't work at all because they were not designed for webcomics. And the ones that was made back then, like Comic Press, you could find all the webcomic website with the same design, the colors and the shadows on the boxes.
Yeah, there's a lot of, clones out there.
Yep.
When I first went to my own website, I also tried with WordPress first. I wasted an entire weekend on it, and then I decided, oh no, I'm gonna try Grawlix. And, well, there I was 2 days later having a finished site, and I loved it.
Yeah, I tried it and I really like it. The backstage of the CMS was wonderful and very easy to order the archive and all the pages. When I tried to order my pages in WordPress, it was like hell. I had to manually change all the chapters and characters who appear in every page. So I highly recommend Grawlix if you had only one language in your comic. WordPress is great if you have a more experimental webcomic with videos, or you need a wiki or a gallery with different effects. I had to make some kind of library with different articles to reflect all the different dump information I had to share with my readers. And in other CMS like Grawlix, I didn't find that option without making a mess.
The CMS that I actually use is I use Spiderforest's own one, which is ProPanda, and it was made by their original founder, Ron Hotto. It's really bare bones, and it's only really available to people who are in Spiderforest, but I didn't make my website until I got in, because at the time I was super intimidated by code. And one of our members, Denise, she'd been on the podcast before. She actually really helped me get my start on it. And now I build websites for a lot of the new members. And what I do like about that one is that it is really versatile. However, you definitely need more of a knowledge of code than you would, say, using Grawlix. But if you can get into Spiderforest, the nice thing about Spiderforest is that we usually pair you up with somebody that will help you out. And that's always very nice. I feel like it's good to have, even if you just have a good friend that's good with code, it's nice to have that kind of person, at least as emotional support when everything breaks, and to encourage you that it can be fixed. I assure you it can be fixed.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to just show somebody that this thing there is broken than trying to type something up in Google and hoping it turns up the right results.
I found a lot of code doing that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, Google is your friend.
Yeah, Google is your friend. But yeah, if you have to start a webcomic website from the scratch, I would recommend something already made, but not so encapsulated to make another clone like it was Comic Press layout. If you part from something plain and you add some elements to show your webcomic, I think it will work. Yeah, other thing I like from the making your own website is control the feedback you receive. Because in the tapas or webtoons, for example, in webtoons, I can get the notifications when I got comments. So
yeah, you have to go manually through all the episodes to see if you've got new comments.
Oh, really?
Yes, if you got comments.
Oh, that sucks.
It does, yeah.
I'm annoyed that I have to log into my site.
That's the one thing I would change about webtoons.
Do you have to approve the comments? Or...
No, you don't have to approve them. You just don't get a notification if you get one. If you want to see if people commented on your episode 3 weeks back, you don't see them if you don't go to that specific episode and read through the comments.
Oh, but what if they say there's a problem? I've had comments tell me about problems on my site before, and that would suck to not be able to see them.
I mean, especially with Webtoons, I had a problem that I sometimes have double thread pages. And in Webtoons, you only have 800 pixels in width. The text got really, really small, and some people told me about it, and I just didn't see it because I didn't get notifications.
Another thing that I like about having your own website, I think we've touched on this a little bit, but being able to customize the experience is really nice. This is not something that would appeal to a lot of webcomic artists specifically, but something that I did around mine. Like I have like a supernatural drama comic, but like something that I did just because it's something I personally enjoy was I hid like Easter eggs around the site.
Yes.
It's not really something that you could do in, say, Tapas.
Yeah, I did that on Christmas. Yeah.
Well, for Grawlix, you have the opportunity to do like multi-themes. So technically you could assign a different theme for this one page and then also have your Easter egg there.
Nice, because I had to install a plugin in WordPress to do that.
To give a shout out to another comic, I think like, I don't know if any of you guys have read Unsounded, but they did some really interesting things with their page layouts and their websites that integrated the two, and they looked fabulous.
I did that with mine. I did different layouts with dark and lighter designs to fit the different pages. So when I had the background of the comic in dark colors, I switched to the dark website and then to the light. But then I found it was a bit complicated to maintain. And then I decided to switch back to the light forever.
Oh, it was really easy to apply in ProPanda. I literally just put CSS code into the journal code. Everything that's individual to a page is like literally in the journal for each individual page.
That's the con for WordPress. You have to install a plugin for everything.
Plugin jungle.
And what about having your own shop or store in your comic website instead of having it in another place? Because if you have your own website, you can install a custom store, and in other websites like Tapas, you can install anything.
That's true.
For example, having downloads or custom backgrounds or wallpapers, that sort of perks for the readers.
I think I like that, honestly. I feel like it's just better just to have that integrated. And maybe this is a little superficial, but I always feel like it seems more official to be buying it off of the same website.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I like that if you are a fan of a webcomic and you are getting the opportunity to throw money at a creator right then and there instead of having to search the web for a potential kind of merchandise, or just throw it on your website, or at least put in a link there that's really accessible and very easy to find.
Do we want to talk about analytics?
Yeah, that's a good topic.
For example, in WordPress, we have Jetpack, and in Jetpack, you can get a lot of data.
I really like Jetpack. I like just being able to see my page views day by day because it validates me.
I actually had to learn to stay away from Google Analytics because I became I was checking it a wee bit neurotically. So I kind of stopped checking it on a really regular basis because I got a little too into that.
Yeah, same here. When I first integrated it onto my website, I was looking at it each day and hoping that more people came to my site than the day before. But nowadays, yeah, I check it like once a month when I think about it.
I check it every time I log into my webcomic. So it's the first thing I see every time I enter the backstage of the website. So I discover a very great webcomics checking where my readers came from. So I think it's a nice thing to have.
Oh yeah. It's super neat to see like, oh, somebody in Egypt was reading my comic today.
Yeah, I have people in Australia actually liking this stuff.
It's really useful, I think, to see also where people are getting referrals to your comic as well. I learned that I get a lot more from Twitter than I do from Tumblr these days.
Okay, now we are collectively checking our analytics.
I am.
Yeah. I will check mine the second we're done. I have to log into a VPN to get to the back end of my site, but I will check. as soon as we can. I think we've kind of reached just the casual silliness part of this. Do we want to wrap it up?
One other thing I would like to know is about backends of the websites, since I basically only know the Grawlix backend, and I've seen parts of the WordPress backend, and I got very confused with it. But I've never had a glimpse at a ProPanda backend. How's that?
It is super bare bones. It doesn't involve any code, which is nice. It's just, it's literally just black and white, but you can actually customize it, which I've done in a few cases. Grawlix is definitely more user-friendly, I would say.
Yes, it's very user-friendly, I think.
I'm right now in the backend of my WordPress, and I have like 26 categories of options I can access from here. And I think from a new user, this is like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, in Grawlix you have like free settings for comic pages, like new page, then you can see your archive and then you can customize the settings for your archive. That's the essentials and they are right there at the top.
I have taken a brief look at the back end of Comic CMS, which was popular a couple years back, but it's no longer supported by the developer. It also seemed pretty simple. It wasn't that dissimilar from Grawlix. I do think Grawlix is more versatile though.
Yeah, I mean, Grawlix has the advantage that it's still supported and still in development, and that the creators are very active and seeking feedback.
I was using Grawlix to make a friend's website, and they were extremely helpful in getting that done and getting back to me on emails. Like, I was actually really surprised because I wasn't expecting to really get quite so good customer service, if you call it that. I don't know, but
I guess
anyway, they were great.
Frump, the guy who makes Comic Easel, I've been incredibly impressed by the customer service he's given me. I don't even have to ask him anything. I'll just complain about Comic Easel on Twitter, and I guess he searches it because it'll just show up in my mentions with the solution.
Oh, yes, that's nice. I remember I contacted him years ago about the cast hovercars because they throw me an error. He helped me to solve it. It was very quickly and nice.
Yeah, Comic Easel might not be for everyone, but the dude who makes it is cool.
Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. This program is a production of the Spiderforest Webcomic Collective. Our executive producer is Christina Major, and Eva is our showrunner and our audio engineer. The Spiderforest Webcomic Collective is a creator-owned organization funded by voluntary contributions from our members and from readers and listeners like you. Thanks for your support, and don't forget to go to spiderforest.com to read some of the over 70 webcomics written and drawn by our members. At spiderforest.com you can also join the discussion on our forums, interact with our creators, and more, and you can even click on support to make a donation. Your financial support is what has made this podcast possible, so thanks very much for your assistance. I'd like to thank Ben Gremillion for joining us for this episode. You can find out more about Grawlix at getgrawlix.com. Thanks also to Christina for bringing us that interview. You can read her comic Sombulus at sombulus.com. I'd also like to thank Dan Kelly for bringing us to this episode's discussion, as well as our members who participated, Monica Galvan, Sophie Frechner, and Alyssa Alechi. Dan Kelly produces the comic Saffron and Sage. You can read it at saffroncomic.com. Monica produces the comic Moonslayer. You can read it at moonslayer.monicang.com. Sophie produces the comic Soul's Journey. You can read it at soulsjourney.gritianchronicles.com. Alyssa produces the comic Lapse. You can read it at lapsecomic.com. Eva produces the comic Bits Fair. You can read it at bitsfair.com. And this is also a wrap for Season 1 of the Spiderforest Webcomic Podcast. I want to thank all of our guests for making the time to be with us and all of our members for participating, and thank you too for listening. The response to this podcast has been really terrific, and we are already looking forward to Season 2, so tune back in on February 6, 2018, and until then, on behalf of the entire Spiderforest team, thank you for listening, and we'll see you in Season 2. I'm Matthew Moyen. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, because I have here some notes about Tapas deleting the multi-lang option they had.
Yeah, right. Rihanna Dorsey, the creative Suhira, asked me if there are any German comic platforms when Tapas deleted that, since she had a German version of her comic. But I couldn't really help her since all the German platforms are like meh.
Meh. I had my comic hosted in a French platform called Amilova, and it's still working. And some people were translating my comic in other languages, and it was fun. But suddenly it stopped. They stopped translating everything, and the page is like dead right now. So there in Germany, they have platforms like Tapas, or here in Spain we have Subcultura, and it's like...
Well, we have one called Animex, which is, as the name suggests, very focused on anime and manga. And there are a lot of fan comics on there, and I actually really liked the navigation they offered. And when I first made a switch to DeviantArt, I was so disappointed that DeviantArt didn't have anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, on Animex you have to be involved in a fandom to really be noticed. The stuff you do on your own it's a side product that people might see if they read another comic of yours, like the fan art you do.
I think that's largely also the case with Smack Jeeves. It's either fan comics or comics of particular genres.
Yeah.